Hi everyone, I'm Laurie Mega, and this is a video on checking your facts as a content creator. I myself am a content creator. I am a professional writer and editor and founder of Mega Consulting. I also teach writing at Fisher College in Boston. Now this video, Checking Your Facts, is part of my larger course on content creation that you can find on Udemy. So definitely check that out if you're interested in learning about creating content from beginning to end, from planning to tracking, content that's engaging, that brings in audiences and keeps them coming back. And you'll find this video and an accompanying exercise as part of that Udemy course. So let's get started. Let me make myself a little smaller. Oh, that's as small as I get. Okay. Let me just get rid of me then so you can see the slides. So checking your facts, how to produce accurate, trustworthy content. And this is so important in content creation because your job as a content creator is to create whatever it is that you're creating, entertaining content, informative content, how-tos, whatever it is that you're creating has to be trustworthy to your audience. They have to know that what the information that you're giving them is true and right. Otherwise, they won't come back. Your main job as a content creator is to build a relationship with your audience, and you can't do that if they don't trust your content. So we check our facts. We check names, dates, statistics, anything that you can think of that you can actually go out there and research and make sure it's true, you should be checking. Now, why do we do this? Obviously, when you do your research, you're getting it from reliable sources, right? And they're checking the facts, right? Not always. That's not always the case. And so we double and triple and quadruple check everything that we research for our pieces. Now, obviously, if you are getting it straight from the horse's mouth, as they say, then maybe you don't have to do quite so much research, but you still have to do some. And maybe you have to call back that source and say, you said this thing. This is what you said to me, right? This is the quote that I'm using. This is exactly what you said, right? Or this is how you spell your name, correct? This is your title, right? But even in interviews, in first-person interviews, someone could tell you something and inadvertently make a mistake. And so you want to do your research. Another reason that this is important, this goes beyond building a relationship with your audience, and it goes beyond being trustworthy. It's also very important for Google ranking and for ranking on other search engines. Google actually has they have a ranking system based on partially based on the trustworthiness of your content. And they follow this acronym EAT, which stands for expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. They are looking for pieces of content when they review your site that show expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. They want to see that either you or your sources have expertise, you or your sources are the authority on the information, and that you are trustworthy. Your links work, and they go to reliable sources, and that you are using people, research, places, things that are the known subject matter experts. This is especially true with content that they deem YMYL, your money or your life. They have much higher standards for content that puts money at risk or people's lives at risk. So if you're doing an investment blog, if you write for health of any kind, physical, mental, emotional, they want to make absolutely sure that the information that you're putting out there is correct. And it is the most recent standard of healthcare or, taking care of money that's out there, because people's livelihoods and lives could depend on it. And so these are the standards that your content is held up to when Google crawls and reviews blogs, websites, what have you. So I've been talking about trustworthy sources. What exactly is that? There are many different sources that are considered trustworthy, sources that you can use that are fairly beyond reproach. Government resources are one of them, and I'm not talking about like your candidates, your local representatives candidacy page about, vote for me. I'm talking about the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Bureau of Land Management, the census, anything like that with a .gov that gives regular statistics or research. NOAA is generally considered a reliable resource. First-person accounts are also considered fairly reliable. They're a primary resource. So people, a diary, a entry, a letter, a recording of somebody recalling something. Just keep in mind that these are resources from a person who is naturally subjective, or maybe doesn't remember things exactly the way they happen. And so you do have to do some background research just to verify what they're saying actually happened, or to qualify it in your content to say, this person remembers the Battle of the Bulge happening this way, but that was 70 odd years ago. And so we went back and, found this information. Almanacs, maps, atlases, other reference materials like that, considered reliable resources. Trusted news sources. And I write with many caveats because trusted news sources is kind of becoming a bit of an oxymoron, right? I mean, with news sources sort of reporting from each other or reporting very quickly, the pressure to get content up constantly, mistakes are made. And so you do need to check with other, that even if everybody's reporting the exact same thing, it doesn't mean that it's correct. And so you want to dig back into those sources that they use to see if they're giving you the right information. And again, letters, journals, photographs, other first-person sources like that are generally considered reliable, trustworthy. Company sites or official sites for public figures, if you're writing about them, then their site is going to give you probably the most accurate information about things like where they're located, when they were founded, when they became a movie star, what their first movie was. And so those sort of hard and fast facts are what you can glean from those websites. So what are considered not so trustworthy sources? Social media is the big one, right? Everything on social media has to be checked because it can be coming from, it could be taken out of context. It could be coming from an unreliable source. It could be just an outright lie. And so there's so much of the Wild West in social media that you want to check everything. Crowdsourced reference sites, not always the best place for information because people do make mistakes or they do have agendas. And so if you're going to use a crowdsourced site as a sort of a beginning point, check their references and go back to their references and see where they got their information from. If they don't have references, then don't use it. Personal blogs. You can obviously use somebody's personal blog if you're talking about them, that person. But if it is a personal blog about geology, okay, if it's a renowned geologist, yes. But if it's sort of an armchair geologist, they might be an amazing expert, but they're not necessarily considered trustworthy, right? Because they haven't earned that trustworthiness as much as someone who has their doctorate in geology has. Secondary sources, and I'm talking about those news reports where CNN says, according to MSNBC, they reported this. Well, then that becomes secondary, even tertiary at that point. And so you want to go right back to that original source. And then obviously there are plenty of sites out there with questionable motives who are just trying to sell you something. Don't trust them, right? Even those sites, I won't mention any names, of famous doctors who have, talk shows, or, famous celebrities who have health websites. They're marketing themselves, they're marketing their products, they're marketing their lifestyle, and so you can't necessarily trust them. So how do you figure all this out, right? How do you check these facts? Basically, in the beginning, if you are beginning with all of this, then you will have to sort of check everything. After a while, you do kind of develop a sort of a BS detector, shenanigans detector, where you can tell, like, something's kind of off there. And it generally happens when something sounds too general or too good to be true, or it's not clear what this person is saying, and you kind of get the feeling that they don't fully understand what they're writing about. And then you kind of go back and check the facts. One that I came across not too long ago, I obviously won't mention the article because I don't want to embarrass anybody, but I was doing some research on food waste for an article, and I came across this sentence: but the fact that 85% of the food used in a typical restaurant is simply thrown out, that's an issue. That's an awful lot of food for a restaurant to throw out. And I can't imagine, having done a lot of writing and research in the restaurant industry, that any restaurant could stay profitable and open if they threw out 85% of the food they bought and only kept 15% of it. So that right there, my little BS, my shenanigans detector goes off and says, that can't be right. So I clicked on this red link, and I went back to their source, which was a secondary source. And that secondary source said a 2014 study by the Food Waste Reduction Alliance found that 84.3%, not 85, so they rounded, but they rounded in the wrong direction, right? If it's below 5, you round down. If it's above 5, you round up. 84.3% of unused food in American restaurants ends up being disposed of, while 14.3% is recycled and only 1.4% is donated. That is a big difference. This is not 85% of food, of all food being thrown out in a typical restaurant. It's 84.3% of the unused food is being thrown out instead of recycled or donated. So it's not most of the food in a restaurant, it's most of the food that they don't end up using. But I'm going to take it a step back even further. I'm going to click on this, which I actually linked down here too, and look at this 2014 study. This is also very important that this study was done in 2014, and now this recording is being made in 2021. There could be new information out. That's kind of a long span of time, right? So you also want to look at how long it's been since the study has been done. If it's been, close to 10 years or more, that information may not be reliable anymore. That's a lot of time to pass where things may have changed. But needless to say, I'm going to click on this link. And I'm going to go to this study. Please excuse my million tabs. I always have a million tabs open. And it was in fact done by this Food Waste Reduction Alliance in 2014. I verified that. And this is what I'm doing. I'm verifying these things through this study. And there is a summary here. The BSR, this was put out by the BSR. Let's go back to do we know what that is? The BSR, we don't. It's not in here. So I want to know what the BSR is. So I'm going to open up a new link, and I'm going to go to bsr.org. and see what this is, because it matters who funded this study, right? Because if they could have an ulterior motive, right? If you're finding research on the best kinds of whitening toothpaste to use, and you find a study that says, 9 out of 10 dentists prefer this particular brand, brand X whitening toothpaste, but then you see the study was actually sponsored by brand X, well, then that puts a little bit of a spin on it, right? And maybe that's not exactly accurate. There's something in there. They gave the dentist free samples. So they tended to use that because it was free or what have you. I always found that interesting as a mom, having been in hospitals, and there are plenty of baby products out there that will say preferred by 9 out of 10 hospitals or 8 out of 10 hospitals or what have you. But when you stay in a hospital and you have a child, you realize that the hospitals get that stuff from those corporations for free. So of course they prefer it because it's there. Anyway, so I'm still not sure what the BSR is. I'm going to go down to the footer and I'm going to go to our story, or overview. I'll go to overview in the About Us section, and I'm going to look up what they are. An organization of sustainable business experts that works with its global network of world's leading companies. Okay, so this looks like it's an organization trying to build sustainable companies. And I could do more research on this if, the About page isn't always clear, so sometimes you just kind of have to Google them and see what people say. I'm going to say that this is a fairly reliable resource that does extensive research into sustainable business practices. And so this study is legit. And now I'm going to look for that. I'm going to do a search for that statistic and find it in here so I don't have to read the whole thing. And I find the chart that says destination of food waste, restaurant sector respondents. Now respondents, that means only a certain number of people from a survey answered this. So it's important to know how many people answered that survey. And that is something that should be in the article. It shouldn't be your average restaurant wastes this much food. All restaurants in America waste this much food. What you should be writing is, according to this survey of X number of restaurants, 84.3% of them threw out unused food. That's how it has to be qualified. You cannot say all restaurants in America. You cannot say your average restaurant like those two sources did here. You have to say however many restaurants were surveyed, and the more surveyed, the better results, right? They could have surveyed 50 in one section of America. They could have surveyed 100,000. X number of restaurants who responded to this 2014 survey said that they threw out 84.3% of their unused food. And that's how it should be written. And that's how you build trust, with factual information coming straight from the source, coming straight from that study, not from another article like this one did. And that's how you fact check something. You do the same thing with name spellings, quotes that you pull from, if someone didn't say it directly to you, you need to go back to the source. Any kind of statistics. Charts. If somebody publishes a chart or a graph, never trust a chart just because it's pretty or just because it looks interesting. Look at this chart, for example. It has no numbers on it, right? This could be anything. It could be a bar graph of anything. If I say this is the number of people who eat out at restaurants per week in the Boston area versus the number of people who eat out in New York, and I say this is New York and this is Boston, and you go, wow, that's a big difference, right? Well, what if I started putting numbers on this line, right? Like I write Boston down here or New York down here and Boston down here. And then I start putting numbers on this line. And instead of putting 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, I put, I don't know, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. And suddenly you realize it's not such a big difference, right? And people will do that. They'll take the numbers off of charts to make it look like a more dramatic difference when actually it isn't much of a difference. So fact check charts. And obviously you want to fact check everything from social media. I think I've mentioned this before. It is a global game of telephone. One person writes something and somebody likes it and shares it, and somebody else likes it and shares it, or pulls out a quote from it. All those quotes that are online from famous people who never actually said the things that they said. You obviously want to fact check, and it's impossible sometimes. It's impossible to get back to the source in social media. And so it's generally something to avoid unless you are actually writing like, this person said this on social media, and you pull that off, then okay. But you don't want to try to take facts from social media. You want to find other resources. So again, how do you check your facts? Verify your sources. Go back and back and back. Dig all the way back to that research paper, that survey, whatever it is, that is the primary source. Just dig as far back as you can to find that information, just like we did with that food waste example. Find more than one source that says the same thing. So a lot of times, probably in high school or maybe in college, you were asked to find a certain number of sources for every fact. That was for a reason, right? Because you want to make sure that it's absolutely true. Everybody's reporting the same height of Mount Everest, right? Everybody's reporting the same depth of the Mariana Trench, and you have it exactly right. Call someone, right? Pick up the phone and call, you need to know some facts about the last committee meeting in your town committee meeting. Call somebody at City Hall and get the facts. You want to know if a celebrity actually said what they said. All right, you might not get through because it's a celebrity, but call them and see if that's what they actually said. Or the mayor of your town, whatever. And just use common sense. Like we did with that food waste example. It's common sense. A restaurant is not going to throw out 85% of their food and only use 15%. They would not stay in business. They would spend way too much money on food. And so that's just common sense that's not correct. So that's my presentation on fact checking. I hope it was helpful. If you are going to do my Udemy course, there is an exercise, a little homework assignment on, or if you are in the Udemy course right now, thanks and glad to have you here. There is a little exercise on fact checking. I give you some real and not so real, quote unquote, facts. And then you can decide for yourself. You can decide through research, rather, which are true and which are not. And then you can check your answers. So thanks for joining, and I will see you for my next videos. I do a number of videos on writing, research, editing, and SEO. So definitely subscribe to my YouTube channel or check me out on Udemy. Thanks, and have a great day.